His words hung in the air between us, a truth so enormous my mind could not immediately grasp it. The king of the forest. A story, a ghost tale told to frighten children into obeying pack laws. Don't stray too far or the forest king will find you and keep you forever in his roots. And he said he'd been waiting for me. A hysterical bubble of laughter threatened to escape my throat. Had the cold and the fear finally stolen my sanity? Was this some final, cruel trick of the Blackwood, showing me a savior where there was only another kind of predator? I pushed myself up onto my elbows, my body screaming in protest. The shadowed figure hadn't moved. He was a part of the darkness, a stillness more potent than the swirling storm around us. Waiting for me? My voice was stronger now, edged with the bitterness that was my only shield. For the flawed one, the pack's cast-off, you must have been terribly bored. A low sound echoed from the shadows. Not a laugh, but something close to it, a rumble of dark amusement. I have been many things, little wolf. Bored is not one of them. He took a single step forward, and the world seemed to tilt. He didn't just move. The space around him rearranged itself to accommodate his presence. I felt you the moment you crossed my border. Not your fear, not your pain, the song beneath it. The resonance in my chest pulsed again, warmer this time, a deep cello note answering a plucked string. It was unnerving, intimate in a way I had no words for. "What song?" I whispered. The one they tried to silence. He took another step, and a sliver of fragmented moonlight broke through the storm clouds, catching the sharp line of his jaw, the impossible breadth of his shoulders. I still couldn't see his face, but I saw the faint, otherworldly glow of eyes the color of winter violets. The song of old blood, first blood, blood that should have ruled these woods long before men carved them into territories and councils. First blood, the words were a shock of ice water. I'd heard whispers, of course, in forbidden histories, in the seer's fearful mutterings when she thought no one was listening. A lineage so ancient it was myth, a power so pure it was considered a threat. They said it had been extinguished, hunted to extinction centuries ago for the safety of the packs. My hand rose, trembling, to touch the scar on my temple, not from tonight, an older scar, a small, precise burn from a searing rune applied when I was 5, after I'd made a wardstone shiver. They told me my blood was tainted, corrupted, that it called to dark things. Of course they did. It is easier to call a thing monstrous than to admit you are afraid of its beauty. Your blood doesn't call to dark things, Lyra. It commands them, or it would if it weren't shackled. Another step. He was close enough now that I could feel the heat radiating from him, a welcome contrast to my own deadly chill. I should have been terrified. This was a being of legend standing in the heart of the evil forest, but the paralyzing fear I'd felt for the pack's hunters, for the forest creatures, was absent. In its place was a trembling, awe-filled alertness, and that relentless humming resonance that tied a knot between my core and his. Shackled? I looked down at my own wrists, pale in the gloom. I saw no chains. He said, and his voice softened almost to a murmur, "Not with iron." His voice softened almost to a murmur, "Not with iron, with fear, with lies carved into your soul long before they carved runes into stone. They made you believe you were small. They made you believe you were wrong." He knelt then, slowly, bringing himself to my level under the shallow overhang. The movement was fluid, powerfully controlled. The violet glow of his eyes was all I could clearly see. "Look at what you did tonight. They threw you to the wolves, literal and figurative, and you walked. You did not beg, you did not crumble. You faced the abyss and you hummed at it. That is not the act of a flawed creature. That is the act of a queen who does not yet know her crown." Her words were a balm and a brand. They soothed the raw, bleeding edges of my soul as even they ignited a new, dangerous fire in its depths. A queen! The concept was so foreign it was laughable. And yet, the way he said it, it wasn't flattery. It was a statement of fact, as if he were identifying a species of tree or a phase of the moon. I don't feel like a queen, I confessed, the admission torn from me. I feel broken and very, very cold. Something shifted in his presence. The immense, watchful power seemed to focus, to become intent. Then that is the first thing we will change. He moved so fast my eyes couldn't track it. One moment he was kneeling in the mud, the next he had shrugged off a heavy, dark cloak I hadn't even noticed in the shadows. It was lined with a fur so deep and black that it seemed to drink the faint light. Before I could protest, before I could even flinch, he was wrapping it around my shoulders. The weight of it was immense, but the warmth was immediate and profound. It smelled of pine, of night air, of stone, and of him, a clean, wild, powerful scent that somehow made the resonance inside me settle into a quiet, steady thrum. It was the most intimate thing anyone had ever done for me. You don't have to, I stammered, my fingers instinctively clutching the incredibly soft fur at the collar. I do, he stated simply. His hand, large and surprisingly gentle, brushed against my cheek as he settled the hood. A spark, not of pain, but of pure, undiluted energy jumped from his skin to mine. My silver eyes flew wide. His violet gaze held mine, and in that shared shock I saw my own reflection, small, battered, but with a new, fierce light kindling behind the fear. The resonance, he breathed, his own voice touched with wonder. It is stronger than I imagined. The bond recognizes itself. Bond? Panic, sharp and sudden, lanced through me. Mating bonds were arranged political. They were not this electric, undeniable pull in the center of a cursed forest. Not that kind of bond, he said, as if reading my thoughts. His hand fell away, though the ghost of its touch lingered. This is a blood bond, a recognition of lineage. Your ancient song answers to mine. My power sees yours. It has been sleeping for a century, waiting for an echo. He rose to his full, impressive height, looking down at me. My name is Ronan. Once, long ago, they called me the Storm Lord, king of the northern wastes and all the wild places between. The council and their packs have forgotten me. The forest has not. Ronan, the name suited him, solid, enduring, a mountain in the shape of a man. What do you want with me, Ronan? I asked, pulling the cloak tighter, drawing his strength and warmth into my bones. I want to see, he said, his violet eyes gleaming. I want to see what happens when the shackles of fear are removed. I want to see what a daughter of the first blood becomes when she is no longer told she is a monster. He extended a hand, not to grab, but to offer. I want to show you that the forest they call evil is not a grave, it is a cradle, and it has been waiting for you to come home. Home. The word was a knife and a promise. I had no home. The silver veil had cast me out. My home was a ring of torches and turned backs. I looked at his offered hand, then back into the darkness of the woods from which I had come. Going back was death. Staying here was an unknown so vast that terrified me. But as I looked into Ronan's unwavering violet eyes, I didn't see the hunger of a predator. I saw a reflection of my own buried strength. I saw a promise of shelter, not just from the storm, but from the lies that shaped my life. My hand, small and ice-cold, slid into his. His fingers closed around mine, sending another, stronger pulse of that resonant energy up my arm. It didn't hurt. It felt like waking up. All right, I whispered, the word barely audible over the rain. A slow, genuine smile touched his lips, the first real expression I had seen on him. It transformed his face from a forbidding monument to something strikingly, fiercely alive. Then hold on, little wolf, he said, and the world dissolved into a blur of shadow and speed. His words hung in the air between us, a truth so enormous my mind could not immediately grasp it. The king of the forest, a story, a ghost tale told to frighten children into obeying pack laws. Don't stray too far or the forest king will find you and keep you forever in his roots. And he said he'd been waiting for me. A hysterical bubble of laughter threatened to escape my throat. Had the cold and the fear finally stolen my sanity? Was this some final, cruel trick of the Blackwood, showing me a savior where there was only another kind of predator? I pushed myself up onto my elbows, my body screaming in protest. The shadowed figure hadn't moved. He was a part of the darkness, a stillness more potent than the swirling storm around us. Waiting for me? My voice was stronger now, edged with the bitterness that was my only shield. For the flawed one, the pack's cast-off, you must have been terribly bored. A low sound echoed from the shadows. Not a laugh, but something close to it, a rumble of dark amusement. I have been many things, little wolf. Bored is not one of them. He took a single step forward, and the world seemed to tilt. He didn't just move, the space around him rearranged itself to accommodate his presence. I felt you the moment you crossed my border. Not your fear, not your pain, the song beneath it. The resonance in my chest pulsed again, warmer this time, a deep cello note answering a plucked string. It was unnerving, intimate in a way I had no words for. "What song?" I whispered. The one they tried to silence. He took another step, and a sliver of fragmented moonlight broke through the storm clouds, catching the sharp line of his jaw, the impossible breadth of his shoulders. I still couldn't see his face, but I saw the faint, otherworldly glow of eyes the color of winter violets. The song of old blood, first blood, blood that should have ruled these woods long before men carved them into territories and councils. First blood, the words were a shock of ice water. I'd heard whispers, of course, in forbidden histories, in the seer's fearful mutterings when she thought no one was listening. A lineage so ancient it was myth, a power so pure it was considered a threat. They said it had been extinguished, hunted to extinction centuries ago for the safety of the packs. My hand rose, trembling, to touch the scar on my temple, not from tonight, an older scar, a small, precise burn from a searing rune applied when I was 5, after I'd made a wardstone shiver. They told me my blood was tainted, corrupted, that it called to dark things. Of course they did. It is easier to call a thing monstrous than to admit you are afraid of its beauty. Your blood doesn't call to dark things, Lyra. It commands them, or it would if it weren't shackled. Another step. He was close enough now that I could feel the heat radiating from him, a welcome contrast to my own deadly chill. I should have been terrified. This was a being of legend standing in the heart of the evil forest, but the paralyzing fear I'd felt for the pack's hunters, for the forest creatures, was absent. In its place was a trembling, awe-filled alertness, and that relentless humming resonance that tied a knot between my core and his. Shackled? I looked down at my own wrists, pale in the gloom. I saw no chains. He said, and his voice softened almost to a murmur. Not with iron. His voice softened almost to a murmur. Not with iron, with fear, with lies carved into your soul long before they carved runes into stone. They made you believe you were small. They made you believe you were wrong. He knelt then, slowly, bringing himself to my level under the shallow overhang. The movement was fluid, powerfully controlled. The violet glow of his eyes was all I could clearly see. Look at what you did tonight. They threw you to the wolves, literal and figurative, and you walked. You did not beg, you did not crumble. You faced the abyss and you hummed at it. That is not the act of a flawed creature. That is the act of a queen who does not yet know her crown. Her words were a balm and a brand. They soothed the raw, bleeding edges of my soul as even they ignited a new, dangerous fire in its depths. A queen! The concept was so foreign it was laughable. And yet, the way he said it, it wasn't flattery. It was a statement of fact, as if he were identifying a species of tree or a phase of the moon. I don't feel like a queen, I confessed, the admission torn from me. I feel broken and very, very cold. Something shifted in his presence. The immense, watchful power seemed to focus, to become intent. Then that is the first thing we will change. He moved so fast my eyes couldn't track it. One moment he was kneeling in the mud, the next he had shrugged off a heavy, dark cloak I hadn't even noticed in the shadows. It was lined with a fur so deep and black that it seemed to drink the faint light. Before I could protest, before I could even flinch, he was wrapping it around my shoulders. The weight of it was immense, but the warmth was immediate and profound. It smelled of pine, of night air, of stone, and of him, a clean, wild, powerful scent that somehow made the resonance inside me settle into a quiet, steady thrum. It was the most intimate thing anyone had ever done for me. You don't have to, I stammered, my fingers instinctively clutching the incredibly soft fur at the collar. I do, he stated simply. His hand, large and surprisingly gentle, brushed against my cheek as he settled the hood. A spark, not of pain, but of pure, undiluted energy jumped from his skin to mine. My silver eyes flew wide. His violet gaze held mine, and in that shared shock I saw my own reflection, small, battered, but with a new, fierce light kindling behind the fear. The resonance, he breathed, his own voice touched with wonder. It is stronger than I imagined. The bond recognizes itself. Bond? Panic sharp and sudden lanced through me. Mating bonds were arranged political. They were not this electric, undeniable pull in the center of a cursed forest. Not that kind of bond, he said, as if reading my thoughts. His hand fell away, though the ghost of its touch lingered. This is a blood bond, a recognition of lineage. Your ancient song answers to mine. My power sees yours. It has been sleeping for a century, waiting for an echo. He rose to his full, impressive height, looking down at me. My name is Ronan. Once, long ago, they called me the Storm Lord, king of the northern wastes and all the wild places between. The council and their packs have forgotten me. The forest has not. Ronan, the name suited him, solid, enduring, a mountain in the shape of a man. What do you want with me, Ronan? I asked, pulling the cloak tighter, drawing his strength and warmth into my bones. I want to see, he said, his violet eyes gleaming. I want to see what happens when the shackles of fear are removed. I want to see what a daughter of the first blood becomes when she is no longer told she is a monster. He extended a hand, not to grab, but to offer. I want to show you that the forest they call evil is not a grave, it is a cradle, and it has been waiting for you to come home. Home. The word was a knife and a promise. I had no home. The silver veil had cast me out. My home was a ring of torches and turned backs. I looked at his offered hand, then back into the darkness of the woods from which I had come. Going back was death. Staying here was an unknown so vast that terrified me. But as I looked into Ronan's unwavering violet eyes, I didn't see the hunger of a predator. I saw a reflection of my own buried strength. I saw a promise of shelter, not just from the storm, but from the lies that shaped my life. My hand, small and ice-cold, slid into his. His fingers closed around mine, sending another, stronger pulse of that resonant energy up my arm. It didn't hurt. It felt like waking up. All right, I whispered, the word barely audible over the rain. A slow, genuine smile touched his lips, the first real expression I had seen on him. It transformed his face from a forbidding monument to something strikingly, fiercely alive. Then hold on, little wolf, he said, and the world dissolved into a blur of shadow and speed. The journey was a disorienting rush. The forest became a dark, streaming painting around me, the trees a blur of black and gray. Ronan moved with a speed that defied nature, cradling me against his chest as if I weighed no more than a child. The immense cloak he'd given me wrapped around us both, a pocket of warmth and his wild, calming scent amidst the chaos. I buried my face against the rough linen of his tunic, my eyes squeezed shut, trusting his strength because I had no other choice. When the motion finally ceased, the silence was profound. The drumming rain was gone, replaced by the soft, echoing crackle of fire and the distant sigh of wind over stone. I opened my eyes. We were in a cave, but unlike any I had ever seen. It was a vast, cathedral-like space, the ceiling lost in shadows high above. The walls were smooth, carved by time and water, and glistened with mineral veins that caught the light from a central fire pit. The floor was covered in thick, luxurious furs of animals I couldn't name. Simple, sturdy furniture hewn from dark wood stood against one wall. A table, chairs, a massive bed frame piled with more furs. Shelves held ancient-looking books, clay pots, and bundles of dried herbs. It was sparse, but it spoke of permanence, of a life lived deliberately, far from the chatter of packs and the politics of councils. This was his sanctuary, the den of the Forest King. Ronan set me down gently on a pile of furs near the fire. The heat was a blessing, seeping into my frozen bones. He moved away, his movements efficient and silent, gathering things, a clay bowl of water, clean cloths, a small stone jar of salve that smelled of honey and comfrey. "Where are we?" I asked, my voice small in the great space. "Deep within the mountain," he said, not looking up as he soaked a cloth. "Below the roots of the oldest tree in the Blackwood. The wards here are mine. The council's seers could stand 10 feet above us and feel nothing but solid rock. You are safe." Safe. The word was a foreign currency. I wasn't sure I knew its value anymore. I watched him as he worked. In the steady firelight, I could see him properly for the first time. He was formidable. His hair was the color of crow's wings, long and tied simply back from a face that was all hard angles and deliberate planes. He looked neither young nor old. Age seemed irrelevant on him. It was the eyes that held you, violet, deep-set and fathomless, holding centuries of solitude and storm. He wore simple, dark clothes that did nothing to hide the sheer power of his build. This was not the polished, ceremonial strength of a pack alpha. This was the raw, untamed power of a cliff face, of a deep river current. He knelt before me again, the bowl of water in hand. "Your head," he said, his voice a low rumble. It wasn't a question. I nodded, a slight motion. He reached out, his fingers surprisingly deft, as he brushed my blood-matted hair back from the cut on my temple. His touch was clinical, but the resonance between us hummed at the contact, a quiet, persistent music only we could hear. He cleaned the wound with a tenderness that belied his fierce appearance. The water was warm, the cloth soft. No one had tended to me with such uncomplicated care since I was a very small child. "Why are you doing this?" the question slipped out, born of a lifetime of conditioned disbelief. "You don't know me. I'm nothing to you, a stranger with inconvenient blood." He paused, the cloth hovering near my skin. His violet eyes met mine, and in their depths I saw not pity, but a profound understanding that shook me. "You are not nothing," he said, each word deliberate. "You are a reminder. For 100 years I have watched from the shadows as the packs shrank their world with fear and rules. They have forgotten what true power looks like. They have forgotten the old songs, the deep magic. They call this forest evil because they cannot control it, and they call you flawed because they cannot comprehend you." He resumed his careful work, applying the salve. Its coolness was soothing. "In you, Lyra, I see an echo of the world that was, a world where power was a birthright, not a crime, where wolves were truly free, bound by choice and blood, not by council decree and fear." He sat back on his heels, studying me. "You asked what I want. I want to remember what that world felt like, and I think you are the key to remembering." His words painted a picture so vast it was dizzying. He wasn't just offering me shelter from a storm, he was offering me a new history, a new identity. It was terrifyingly seductive. "I don't know how to be that key," I admitted, my fingers twisting in the fur of his cloak, which I still wore. "I only know how to be quiet, how to be small, how to disappear." "Then we will start with the opposite. We will start with a question. What is the first thing you want? Not what you were told to want, not what would please your pack or your betrothed. What does Lyra, alone in this sanctuary with her life her own for the first time, truly want? The question stunned me. My wants had never mattered. My wants were irrelevant to pack stability, to political alliances, to not disturbing the wards. I opened my mouth, then closed it. What did I want? Beyond survival. The answers came, timid and true. I want to be warm, I whispered. Done, he said, gesturing to the fire. I want to not be afraid all the time. That will take longer, but it is possible. I took a shaky breath. I want to know what this is. I gestured vaguely between our chests where the resonance lived. This feeling, this connection, it frightens me. His expression grew serious, contemplative. It is the song of first blood recognizing itself across the ages. My lineage is also ancient, though different from yours. Our powers are complementary. Where yours commands and reveals, mine protects and endures. The resonance is a harmony waiting to be sung. It frightens you because it is the most real thing you have ever felt, and you have been taught that real things are dangerous. He stood and moved to the table, pouring water from a pitcher into a clay cup. He brought it to me. Drink. The fear will not vanish in a night, but you can learn to carry it differently. You can learn to let the resonance be a strength, not a terror. I took the cup, my fingers brushing his. The spark was there again, but fainter, familiar now. I drank the cool, clear water. It tasted of mountain springs. For a long time we sat in silence, the fire between us. The events of the day, the betrayal, the walk, the terror, the rescue, crashed over me in a great weary wave. The warmth, the safety, the sheer exhaustion finally won. My eyelids grew heavy. Sleep, Lyra, Ronan said, his voice a soft command from the other side of the fire. He had taken a chair, a book open in his hands, though his eyes were watching the cave entrance. Nothing will harm you here. It was the promise in his words, the absolute certainty that broke the last of my resistance. I let myself sink into the furs, pulling his heavy cloak tight around me. The scent of pine and wildness enveloped me. For the first time since I could remember, I felt not just safe, but anchored. As I drifted into the edge of sleep, a final, treacherous thought whispered through my mind. Alara had promised to always protect me. Kale had promised a partnership of sorts. Both promises turned to dust in the rain. This king of shadows and stone had made no promises at all, and yet lying in his den, wrapped in his cloak, under the protection of his watchful gaze, I felt more secure than I ever had in the heart of my own pack. The resonance in my chest hummed a quiet, steady lullaby, and for the first time, I didn't try to silence it. I let it sing me to sleep. And in his violet gaze, I saw something that stole my breath. It was pride, not possessive, not arrogant, the pure, bright pride of a teacher seeing a student grasp a fundamental truth. That second will become a minute, he said, his voice thick with promise. Then an hour, then a lifetime. You have taken the first step back to yourself, Lyra, and it was the bravest one. In that moment, the resonance between us didn't just hum, it sang, a single triumphant note of shared victory. He didn't move to touch me, but the space between us felt charged, intimate, and wonderfully safe. And I realized, with a jolt that was both thrilling and terrifying, that I was no longer just a cast-off surviving in a king's sanctuary. I was a student, and my first lesson had just begun. Days bled into a rhythm as deep and steady as the mountain's pulse. My world shrank to the sanctuary, the Heartstone Chamber, and the small hidden forest clearing Ronan showed me, a sun-dappled bowl where the blackwood felt less oppressive, almost gentle. My world and him. The physical wounds healed quickly under his care. The deeper ones, those were the focus of our quiet, intense days. Each morning we would go to the Heartstone Chamber. My task was always the same and always different, to find the harmony. Sometimes it was with the crystals. Sometimes it was with the slow drip of water from a stalactite. Once it was with the pattern of wind sighing through the high crevices. It was a language I was learning to speak with my soul, and Ronan was a patient, demanding tutor. He never touched me to guide the power. He used words, images, the sheer force of his own calm presence. He would say, "Make the light in the crystal brighten," or "still the surface of the pool without touching it." The first dozen attempts would end in nothing but my own frustration. But then there would be a moment, a flicker of silver light, a tremor in the water, and his low "good" would feel like a prize greater than any pack accolade. The resonance between us became the backdrop of my existence. It was a constant, quiet hum, a connection that felt as natural as breathing. I grew accustomed to the way it would swell when he entered a room, or calm when we sat in comfortable silence. It wasn't intrusive, it was comforting, a tether to reality in this strange new life. He told me stories of the time before the Council of Nine, when territories were fluid and alphas were chosen by strength of spirit, not bloodline politics, of the great libraries of living wood, now burned to ash, of the first purge, when the fear of primal power like mine began to fester into policy. He spoke of his own long watch, a century of neutrality that felt less like peace and more like a slow, cold death. "Why did you stay neutral?" I asked him one evening as we sat by the fire. I was mending a tear in my shift, a domestic task that felt surreal in this setting. "With your power, you could have challenged them." He stared into the flames, his face a mask of carved stone. "Because the last time I intervened for someone with power like yours, it ended in fire," he said, his voice so low it was almost part of the crackling logs. Her name was Isolde. She was brilliant, fierce. The council feared her, turned her own allies against her with whispers and lies. She called for my aid. I gave it, and in the end, the lies wormed so deep into her own mind that she believed them. She turned the power I helped her awaken against my people to prove her loyalty to the council. He finally looked at me, the pain in his violet eyes ancient and raw. I vowed never to let myself be a weapon for another's destruction again. Neutrality was my penance. His confession hung in the air, heavy with grief. I understood then the immense risk he had taken in bringing me here. It wasn't just breaking a century of tradition, it was defying his own most painful ghost. "I am not her," I said, softly, holding his gaze. "He knows," he replied, and the certainty in that one word mended something fragile in the space between us. "Your song is different. Hers was a battle cry from the first. Yours was a lullaby. It still is. But lullabies can hold great power, Lyra. They can soothe a raging beast or wake a sleeping giant." The giant in me was stirring. I could feel it in the exercises, in the way the forest creatures in the clearing no longer fled when I approached, but watched me with curious, respectful stillness, in the way a wilting fern seemed to perk up when I sat beside it, humming without thought. But the outside world, the world of packs and councils, had not forgotten us. The warning came on the wings of a bird, not a raven, but a small, drab forest thrush. It fluttered into our clearing one afternoon, landing on a stump with an unnatural stillness. Ronan went rigid. He approached the bird, and it didn't fly away. It opened its beak, and a voice, thin and raspy and laced with static, emerged. It was a voice I knew, one that sent a bolt of old dread through me, the seer. "Stormlord," the bird voice hissed, "the girl is a canker. You harbored death. The council has convened. The Raven Guard mobilizes. They do not come for negotiation. They come for eradication of the flaw and of the king who forgets his place. You have 3 days. Surrender her, or the blackwood will burn." The thrush shuddered, let out a normal chirp, and flew away. The silence it left behind was deafening. The word eradication echoed in the hollow of my chest. They would burn the forest, my sanctuary, his kingdom, all for me. I turned to Ronan. His face was like granite, but his eyes were the violent heart of a storm. The air around him grew heavy, charged. The resonance between us spiked, not with harmony, but with a surge of protective, furious energy that made my skin prickle. "They cannot," I whispered, horror choking me. "The trees, the ancient things." "They can," he said, his voice deathly calm. That calm was more frightening than any roar. "They have made their decision, now I make mine. What will you do?" "What I should have done a century ago," he said, turning to stride back towards the sanctuary. "And you," he paused, looking back at me. The intensity in his gaze pinned me to the spot. "You must accelerate your training. Harmony is a luxury for peaceful times. Now you must learn to project, to shield. Your lullaby must become a wall, Lyra. Can you do that?" The question wasn't a challenge, it was a necessity. The safety of this place, of him, now depended on my ability to wield the very thing I'd been taught to dread. The old fear rose, a familiar icy wave. "I can't, I'll fail, I'll get us both killed." But then I saw it again, the reflection in the black pool, the woman with silver light in her eyes, unbroken. She wouldn't cower, she would stand. I met his stormy gaze, and I felt my own power stir in answer, not as a gentle hum, but as a firm, rising note. "Show me," I said. The next 2 days were a blur of relentless focus. We left the Heartstone chamber. Our classroom became the clearing, the trees our training dummies. The exercises were no longer about subtle harmony. "Feel the life in that oak," Ronan would command, pointing. "Now in your mind, ask it to show you its strength, not to hurt it, to understand its endurance." I would try, reaching out with that new sense. I would feel the slow, immense pulse of the tree's life, the deep anchor of its roots, and then I would try to project that feeling of steadfastness outward, creating an invisible field around me. The first attempts were feeble, collapsing almost instantly. Again, Ronan's voice was uncompromising. "Your doubt is a crack in the wall. You must believe in the rightness of your own presence. You are not an invader here. You are your rightful queen. Command with respect, not force." Rightful queen. The words, once absurd, began to root. When I projected next, I didn't think of defense. I thought of connection. I am Lyra. This is my forest too. We protect each other. A shimmering, barely visible haze of silver flickered into existence around me, holding for a full breath before fading. Ronan's nod was sharp, satisfied. "Good. Now again. Hold it longer." We trained until my mind was numb and my body trembled with exhaustion. Through it all, the resonance between us was a constant, steadying chord. His power was a deep, dark well I could draw strength from. Mine was a clarifying light that seemed to sharpen his focus. We were learning to fight in tandem without ever touching. On the evening of the second day, as a bruised twilight settled, we stood in the clearing, both of us breathing heavily. A semi-stable shield of silvery energy shimmered around me, humming with the song of the living woods. "It will hold against direct assault for a few moments," Ronan assessed, his critical gaze sweeping over the energy field. "Long enough. That is all we can ask." "We?" I let the shield drop, the energy dissipating with a soft sigh. "You said we." He walked closer, the violet in his eyes soft in the fading light. "This is my fight as much as yours. More. I brought you across my border. I claimed you as my guest under my protection. Their threat to burn the Blackwood is a declaration on war on my kingdom." He stopped an arm's length away. The resonance pulled taut between us, a thrum of shared purpose. "We stand together, Lyra, or we do not stand." The certainty in his words, the sheer solidarity of it, was a weapon against fear more potent than any shield I could conjure. As we turned to go back inside, a new sound drifted through the trees. Not the voice of a bird, the distant, mournful howl of a wolf, then another, and another, a chorus from the deepest parts of the Blackwood, a sound that was neither friendly nor hostile. It was a statement. They knew, the ancient things of the forest knew a storm was coming. Ronan listened, his head tilted. A grim, proud smile touched his lips. "They're choosing sides," he murmured. "The forest has been silent for a century. It speaks now, for you." The howls faded, leaving a profound silence. The hook of dread in my stomach was still there, sharp and cold. But intertwined with it now was a thread of fierce, blazing hope. They thought they were coming to burn a flaw and discipline a forgotten king. They had no idea what was waiting for them in the heart of the Blackwood. The dawn of the third day arrived not with sunlight, but with a thick, gray silence that pressed down on the Blackwood like a suffocating blanket. The birds did not sing. The wind did not stir the leaves. It was the quiet of a world holding its breath. I stood at the mouth of the sanctuary, wrapped in my now familiar cloak. Ronan was a statue beside me, his gaze fixed on the tree line 100 yards down the slope. He had not slept. Neither had I. The resonance between us was a live wire, humming with a tense, ready energy. "They are here," he said, his voice barely a whisper, yet it carried absolute authority. "At the old Wardstones, a full contingent of the Raven Guard, and others." My heart, already a frantic drum, stuttered. "Others?" "Pack Alphas," he said, a ripple of disgust in his tone. "Loyalists. They have come to witness, to lend legitimacy to the Council's purge." He finally looked down at me. The storm was back in his eyes, but it was controlled, focused into a lethal edge. "Your pack is among them, Lyra, the Silverveil." The words were a physical blow. My father, the elders, Kale, Alara, they hadn't just cast me out, they had come to watch the cleanup, to ensure the job was done. The ashes of my old life weren't even cold, and they were here to scatter them. A coldness that had nothing to do with the morning air seeped into my bones. Then, from that cold, a spark ignited. Not the warm, harmonic light I'd been cultivating, but something sharper, a silvery flame of pure, unadulterated anger. "Let them watch," I heard myself say. My voice sounded different, clearer, harder. "Let them all see what their flaw has become." Ronan's gaze sharpened with approval. "That's the spirit, little wolf. But remember, anger is fuel. It must be directed, or it will burn you instead of your enemies. Keep your shield in mind, your lullaby. That is your foundation." A horn sounded in the distance, a bleak, brazen note that shattered the unnatural silence. It was answered by the screech of ravens, real ones this time, taking flight in a black cloud from the direction of the Wardstones. They were beginning their advance. "Take your position at the Heartstone pool," Ronan instructed, his hand coming to rest briefly, firmly on my shoulder. The contact sent a bolt of steadfast energy through the resonance. "The mountain's pulse will strengthen you. I will meet them at the clearing. Do not come out unless the sanctuary itself is breached. Your power is a secret weapon, Lyra. Do not reveal its full extent until it is time." "And when is that?" I asked, my eyes searching his. "You will know," he said, with a certainty that brooked no argument. Then his expression softened, just for a fraction of a second. "Trust yourself, as I trust you." He turned and walked down the slope toward the clearing, not with haste, but with the deliberate, ground-consuming stride of a sovereign walking to a predestined meeting. He did not look back. I ran back inside, through the main cavern, into the Heartstone chamber. The black pool was still, the crystals pulsing with their steady violet light. I knelt beside it, placing my palms flat on the cool stone. I reached for the mountain's thrum, for the harmonic we had practiced. I built my shield, not as a flickering practice field, but as a solid, silvery intention anchored deep into the earth below me. I felt it settle around me, a second skin of resonant energy. My lullaby turned to armor. Then I reached out with my new senses. I could not see, but I could feel. I felt the heavy, clanking approach of many armored bodies, the Raven Guard. I felt the sharper, more volatile signatures of the pack alphas, their auras buzzing with tension and a bloodthirsty curiosity. And among them, like a cluster of familiar sour notes, I felt the Silverveil. My father's weary resignation, Kale's tense, dutiful aggression, and Alara, a frantic, fluttering panic that felt like a trapped bird. They were in the clearing now. I could hear the muffled sounds of orders, the rustling of displacing many bodies. And then Ronan's voice, a rolling peal of thunder in the confined space, impossible to mistake. You stand in the kingdom of the Blackwood, uninvited. You sound horns of war in a place of ancient peace. Explain this trespass, or be removed from it. A colder, older voice answered, the chief seer. We do not treat with shadows and legends, Ronan. We treat with the law. You have broken it. You harbor a condemned abomination, a danger to all packs. Surrender the girl called Lyra, disband whatever fantasy of sovereignty you cling to, and the council may be merciful. The forest may be spared. The forest does not require your mercy. Ronan's voice was pure, icy scorn. And the girl is under my protection. Your law holds no power here. Your condemnation is meaningless. You have one chance. Turn around. Leave my lands. A tense silence. Then a new voice. Younger, brash, an alpha from a western pack, I guessed. You are one, Stormlord. We are many. The age of wild kings is over. The council rules. Hand over the tainted one. Come and take her. And that simple challenge hung in the air, a gauntlet thrown with earth-shattering confidence. It began, not with a shouted order, but with a whistle of arrows. I felt them, dozens of projectiles lancing through the air toward Ronan's singular signature. My breath caught. Then I felt his power erupt. It was a vortex, a concussive wave of pure, violent force that radiated from him. I heard the arrows shatter, the shouts of men thrown back, the crack of splintering wood. He hadn't even fully shifted. The resonance in my chest roared in response, a sympathetic surge that made my shield glow brighter. Chaos erupted in the clearing, snarls, the clash of steel, bestial wars as wolves shifted. But through the din, Ronan's presence was a fixed, unmoving point of cataclysmic power. I could feel him moving, a dance of devastating efficiency. He was holding them, all of them. But the pressure was immense. I felt the moment the pack alphas joined the fray in earnest. 5, 6 powerful signatures converging on his one point. The resonant bond between us stretched taut, vibrating with strain. He was mighty, but he was not invincible, not against these numbers. Do not come out unless the sanctuary itself is breached. Your power is a secret weapon, Lyra. Do not reveal its full extent until it is time. The words echoed in my head. But this was a battle of attrition. They would wear him down. They would break through. And when they did, they would find me here, hiding. A new, specific sensation cut through the general melee. A familiar, hated signature, cold, precise, and slithering with dark intent, was detaching from the main fight. Not heading for Ronan, skirting the edge of the clearing, coming up the slope, toward the sanctuary. The seer. She wasn't engaging in the brute force battle. She was coming to dismantle the mountain's wards, to get to the source, to me. Fear, cold and sharp, shot through me. This was it. The sanctuary was about to be breached. I stood, my shield solid around me, my heart hammered against my ribs, not just with fear, but with a rising, righteous fury. They had hunted me, betrayed me, and now they sought to corner me in my only refuge. They sought to kill the king who showed me kindness. The lullaby in my soul shifted key. The gentle harmony with the mountain twisted, tempered by the steel of my anger and forged in the fire of my will to protect. The silvery light around me wasn't just a shield anymore. It began to crackle, throwing off tiny, angry sparks. I heard the seer's voice at the entrance to the main cavern, chanting in the guttural old tongue, her power a screeping drill against Ronan's ancient wards. I felt them shudder. I walked out of the Heartstone chamber, into the main cavern. I stood before the fire pit, facing the entrance tunnel. The resonance with Ronan was a scream of battle and defiance. I sent a pulse down that bond, not of fear, but of resolve. I am here. I am ready. The final ward on the entrance shattered with a sound like breaking crystal. The seer stepped into my sanctuary. She was as I remembered, spare, bony, draped in white robes now stained with forest grime. Her flint chip eyes widened momentarily at the sight of me, standing calm within a nimbus of crackling silver light. Then her lips peeled back in a disdainful smile. "So," she rasped, "the flaw awaits its correction. You have saved me the trouble of digging you out of some hole, girl. Come quietly, your death will be quicker." "You are in my home," I said, and my voice echoed in the cavern, layered with that new, harder resonance. "You have threatened my king. You will leave now." She actually laughed, a dry, rustling sound. "Your home, your king, you are delusional, as befits your corrupted state." She raised her hands, runes carved into her own palms beginning to glow with a sickly green light. "I will unmake you, and then I will unmake this pathetic den of rebellion." She thrust her hands forward, a wave of nullifying energy designed to unravel magic, to sever connections, shot toward me. It was the antithesis of my power. It was the essence of every suppression, every whispered curse, every fearful glance given form. It hit my shield. The silvery light didn't falter. It absorbed. The seer's nullifying energy, meant to unravel, met the harmonious, rooted song of the mountain and my own awakened blood. It wasn't a clash of opposites. It was a complex chord being resolved. My shield brightened, drinking the green energy, converting its intent into pure, harmless light. The seer's smile vanished. "Impossible." "Ah, you were wrong," I said, taking a step forward. The crystals in the walls, sensing the conflict, began to pulse in frantic time with my heart. My blood isn't corruption. It's a truth you were too small to understand. I didn't know any offensive moves. Ronan hadn't taught me that. But I knew protection, I knew connection, and I knew how to project an unwavering no. I focused on the seer, on the invasive, unraveling signature of her magic. I didn't attack her. I simply reinforced the reality of the space around me. I amplified the mountain's pulse, the song of the crystals, the truth of my own rightful presence. I made the sanctuary more itself. The effect was instantaneous. The seer's nullifying light guttered and died. She staggered as if struck by a physical force, a force of pure, undeniable presence. Her eyes widened with real, primal fear. She wasn't facing a spell. She was facing a fundamental assertion of being that her petty, controlling magic could not comprehend, let alone combat. "You!" she gasped, backing toward the broken entrance. From outside, a triumphant, earth-shaking roar split the air. Ronan. The resonant bond flared with a surge of victorious energy. The pressure of the multiple alphas had broken. He was winning. The seer heard it too. Her face, already pale, went ashen. Her mission had failed. The secret weapon was not so secret, and it was far more powerful than she could handle. She turned to flee. I didn't stop her. I let her go, stumbling back into the daylight. I held my position, my shield still blazing, the song of the mountain and my blood a triumphant symphony in the stone chamber. The sounds of battle from the clearing were fading, replaced by cries of retreat, the sounds of the Raven Guard and pack loyalists breaking and running. It was over. For now. I released the shield, the silvery light dissolving into the air. The sudden silence was roaring in my ears. I was shaking not from exhaustion, but from the aftershock of power truly used, of a stand truly taken. A moment later, Ronan appeared in the shattered entrance. He was in his fully shifted alpha form, a magnificent, terrifying beast of shadow and violet-eyed fury, his dark fur matted with substances I didn't want to identify. He shifted back as he crossed the threshold, his human form streaked with dirt and sweat, breathing heavily, but utterly, devastatingly whole. His eyes found me. The resonance in their gaze was gone, replaced by an emotion so fierce and warm it stole the breath from my lungs. He saw the fading silver light around me, the determined set of my jaw, the fact that I was standing unharmed in the center of the room he had left me to defend. He didn't speak, he just looked at me, and in the resonant bond between us I felt it, a wave of pride, of relief, of a respect so profound it felt like a new kind of gravity. I had held the sanctuary. I had faced my oldest fear and turned it away. I was no longer just a student or a guest or a survivor. Standing there in the aftermath, with the King of the Blackwood looking at me as an equal, I knew what I was. I was a power, and the Council had just made the gravest error of its long, corrupt life.
Silence rushed in to fill the space left by the seer's flight and the fading echoes of battle. It was a different quiet than before, not the tense hush of anticipation, but the heavy, breathless stillness that follows a storm. The air in the sanctuary smelled of ozone, crushed pine, and the faint, coppery tang of blood. Ronan stood just inside the shattered entrance, his chest rising and falling with deep, measured breaths. The fierce light in his violet eyes softened as they swept over me, checking for injury, but the intensity of his focus never wavered. The resonant bond between us, which had been a screaming conduit of conflict, settled into a profound, steady hum. It felt solid, forged. He took a step forward, then another, his movements still carrying the lethal grace of the predator he'd just been. He stopped an arm's length away. Without a word, he reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair away from my face. His touch was gentle, but it sent a shock wave through the quiet connection we shared. Not the spark of new contact, but the deep, affirming pulse of something tested and found true. "You held the heart of the mountain," he said, his voice a rough scrape that held a world of feeling. "You turned her own poison into light. I felt it. The entire forest felt it." His praise was a warm balm on the raw nerves left by the confrontation, but the reality of what had just happened pressed in on me. They're gone? The Raven Guard? The Alphas? Broken and scattered back to the tree line, he confirmed, a grim satisfaction edging his tone. Their cohesion shattered the moment they realized the Tainted One was not cowering in a hole, but was a fortress they could not breach, and the moment they realized their legendary Stormlord had not grown weak in his solitude. He finally allowed a slow, tired smile to touch his lips. They will carry tales of this day back to the Council, tales that will spread fear far more effectively than any decree. The mention of tales made my stomach clench. My pack, the Silver Veil, did they— His smile faded. He gave a single, short nod. Yes, they were there. They fought, not with the same fervor as the Raven Guard, but they held the line. He paused, his gaze searching mine. "Your father took a wound defending the seer's retreat. A shallow thing, but symbolic. Kale fought with a cold efficiency. And Alara—" Her name hung between us, the bond sister who had turned away, who had come to watch me burn. "What of her?" I forced the words out. She did not shift, she did not raise a weapon. She stood at the very back, her hands over her ears, as if she could block out the sound of her own conscience. His voice held no judgment, only fact. When the retreat sounded, she was the first to run. A bitter laugh escaped me, hollow and painful. So she came to witness the monster's end, but couldn't stomach the sight of the fight. How very like her. Ronan didn't offer empty comfort. He simply stood with me in the truth of it, his presence a steady anchor in the turmoil of my heart. That, more than anything, helped the sharpest edges of the pain to dull. "We must secure the entrance," he said, after a moment, his practical tone pulling me back to the present. "The wards are damaged, not destroyed. I can reinforce them, but I will need your harmony with the stone. The mountain knows your song now. It will accept your help." The idea was both daunting and right, to not just hide within his power, but to help mend it, to truly become a part of this sanctuary's defense. I nodded. "Show me what to do." The next few hours were a lesson of a different kind. We worked side by side at the cave mouth. He showed me the intricate, invisible lattice of his wards, not crude barriers of force, but living patterns of intent woven into the very rock, singing a song of exclusion and warning. The seer's attack had frayed the melody, leaving discordant gaps. My task was not to rebuild his patterns, that was his mastery, but to provide a pure, steady note for him to weave into. I knelt on the stone, placed my palms flat, and reached for the deep, grounding thrum of the mountain. I found my harmony, the lullaby that had become my shield, and I let it flow into the earth, a beacon of calm, silver light. Ronan worked around me, his hands moving in complex passes through the air, his own deep violet energy, the color of twilight shadows and enduring stone, stitching and repairing. Our powers didn't merge, they danced. His was the loom, mine was the thread. The resonance between us became the rhythm of the work. In, out, anchor, weave. It was profoundly intimate, this shared act of creation and protection. There were no words, none were needed. As the last ward snapped back into place with a resonant chime that vibrated in my teeth, a profound exhaustion, sweet and heavy, settled over me. The adrenaline was gone, leaving my muscles weak and my mind blissfully blank. Ronan helped me to my feet, his hand firm under my elbow. "It is done, and stronger than before. The sanctuary now bears your signature as well as mine. It will recognize you, always." The implication of his words warmed me from the inside. Always. It wasn't a promise of forever, but a statement of a new, permanent reality. I belong here, in a way etched into the stone itself. Back inside, he insisted I rest while he saw to the clearing. I didn't argue. I sank into the furs by the fire, wrapped in his cloak, and watched the flames dance. The silence was peaceful now. Owned. When he returned, he had washed and changed into a clean, simple tunic. He carried 2 wooden cups and a small, dark bottle. He poured a measure of deep amber liquid into each and handed one to me. "What is it?" I asked, inhaling the rich, smoky scent. "It's mountain brandy," he said, settling into the chair opposite me. "Distilled from the berries that grow only on the highest, sun-touched cliffs. It tastes of patience and sunlight." He raised his cup slightly. "To a battle fought and a sanctuary held." I touched my cup to his. The brandy was smooth and fiery, spreading a comforting heat through my chest. We drank in companionable silence for a few moments, the fire painting moving shadows on his face. "They will be back," I said quietly, stating the fear that lingered beneath the peace. "Yes," he agreed, without hesitation. "The Council's authority is built on the illusion of invincibility. Today, we cracked that illusion. They cannot let it stand. The next attack will not be a force of arms. It will be subtler, more insidious. They will try to turn the other packs against us with propaganda. They may try to starve us out or poison the forest. The war has entered a new phase." The thought was chilling. I had just learned to stand against a direct assault. The idea of invisible enemies, of whispers and slow corruption, was somehow more frightening. "What do we do?" I asked, looking to him not just for an answer, but for the strength I saw in him. He leaned forward, his violet eyes capturing the firelight. We do not hide, we declare. We show the packs what the council fears so much, that they would burn ancient woods and hunt their own children. We show them the truth. The truth of me? A woman with strange eyes and a hum in my chest? The truth of choice, he said, his voice gaining a passionate edge, that power does not have to mean tyranny, that ancient blood means stewardship, not domination. We will be a beacon, Lyra, not just a fortress. We will reach out to the other outcasts, the suppressed, the wolves who chafe under the council's yoke. We will offer not just sanctuary, but a community, a new way. His vision was vast, breathtaking. It was no longer just about survival or even justice for me. It was about building something new out of the ashes of the old world. The responsibility of it was immense, but the rightness of it echoed in the resonance between us, in the harmony I'd found with the mountain. I want to help, I said, the words fervent and sure. I want to learn not just to defend, but to heal, to grow. If my song can calm beasts and strengthen stone, what else can it do? The look he gave me then was one I would carry with me always. It was a king looking at his equal, his partner in a glorious, daunting future. It was full of a respect so deep, it felt like love, though we neither of us dared speak that word. Then that is what we will learn, he vowed, a solemn rumble. Together. We will learn the songs of growth, of healing, of revelation. Your lullaby has many verses, Lyra. We have only begun to read them. He raised his cup again. To the new verses. I raised mine, my heart so full it ached. To the new verses. As we drank, I made a silent vow of my own, to the mountain, to the forest, to this king of shadows who had given me back my light. I would not just be a survivor, or a weapon, or a queen in a hidden cave. I would become the song the world had tried to silence, and I would sing it until every trembling heart in every oppressed pack heard its melody and remembered what it was to be free.
In the days that followed, the Blackwood changed, or perhaps I simply began to see it with new eyes. Where before the forest had been a monolithic entity of watchful, often menacing silence, it now revealed itself as a chorus of individual voices. Ronan called it the awakening. The retreat of the council forces had been like lifting a great stifling hand from the land. The ancient things that dwelt in the deep groves and shadowed streams, the spirits of rock and root, began to stir. They had been dormant, hiding from the council's corrosive influence, or simply slumbering through the long neutral century of Ronan's watch. Now they sensed the shift. They sensed me. Our training moved out of the clearing and into the living heart of the woods. Ronan was my guide, but the forest itself became my teacher. Listen, he would say, pausing beside a colossal moss-draped oak that looked as old as the mountains. Not with your ears, with your resonance. What is its song? I would close my eyes, press my palm to the rough, damp bark, and reach out. At first, there was just the slow, immense pulse of life, similar to the mountains, but more granular. Then, if I held my harmony steady, I would begin to sense more, a memory of 1,000 sunrises witnessed, the gentle grip of its roots on the bones of the earth, a patient, enduring contentment. Its song was a deep, cello-like drone of stability. It is a guardian, I murmured, my own voice hushed with awe, a keeper of memories. Ronan's hand came to rest on the tree beside mine. Yes, and if you ask with respect, it may share one. I did ask, not with words, but with a feeling of curiosity, of reverence. I offered a thread of my own silver energy, a gift of acknowledgement. A vision flickered behind my eyes. This very spot, centuries ago, not a tree, but a sapling. A woman with hair like spun moonlight and eyes like my own, a daughter of the first blood. placing her hand on its tender trunk, singing to it as it grew. She was planting a ward, a living sentinel. The love in her song, the purpose, brought tears to my eyes. I broke the connection, gasping. I saw an ancestor? Ronan's violet eyes were solemn. The forest remembers its friends. You carry her song. It recognizes you. He looked at the oak with newfound respect. This is not just a tree, Lyra. It is a chronicle, a testament, and now it knows you as a friend. That was the first of many such lessons. We visited a chattering, ice-cold stream. Its song was quick, bright, playful, a melody of movement and cleansing. I learned to listen, and in doing so, I found I could gently suggest a change in its course, asking it to clear a silted pool downstream. It complied with a joyful burble, as if it had been waiting for someone to ask. We stood before a ring of pale, finger-like mushrooms, a fairy circle. Its song was eerie, dissonant, full of temptation and shifting truths. This one, Ronan warned, his voice grave, you do not seek harmony with this. You assert your sovereignty. Its song is one of chaos. You answer with the unshakable note of your own truth. I faced the circle, feeling its pull, its whisper to step inside and lose myself. Instead, I planted my feet, rooted myself to the steady song of the guardian oak far behind me, and hummed a single, clear, unwavering note of my lullaby. The dissonance around the mushrooms shivered and stilled. The temptation faded. I had not destroyed it. Such places had their role in the world, but I had marked my boundary. The forest noted that, too. I was learning the language of the land, and the land was speaking back. It began with small gifts. I would wake to find a cluster of perfect blue-black berries that I loved placed on a stone outside the sanctuary. A rare, luminous moth would land on my shoulder as I practiced my shields, its wings fanning softly. The hostile, skittering presences I'd felt on my first night now kept a respectful, curious distance. Then the wolves came, not the shifted wolves of the packs, but the true wolves of the Blackwood, creatures of tooth and claw and ancient wildness untouched by human politics. They appeared at the edge of our clearing one gray afternoon, a small pack, 5 of them, led by a massive male with a coat of storm cloud gray and eyes of molten gold. Ronan went still beside me. The gray shadow pack, they have not approached a 2-legged creature in living memory. My heart hammered, but I felt no fear from Ronan through our bond, only intense focus. The gray wolf stared at us, then its gaze locked on me. It took a step forward, then another. Instinctively, I reached for my harmony, not as a shield, but as an open hand. I let my resonance flow out, carrying my song, the lullaby, the stability of the oak, the clarity of the stream, my unwavering truth. It was an introduction. The gray wolf stopped. It tilted its head. A low, thoughtful rumble came from its chest. It didn't sound like a growl. It sounded like consideration. Then it did something astonishing. It dipped its great head in a clear, deliberate bow. The wolves behind it followed suit. Ronan let out a slow, shocked breath. "By the old gods," he whispered, "they are pledging fealty." The gray wolf held the bow for a 3 count, then lifted its head. Its golden eyes met mine, and in them I saw an intelligence as deep as any human's, and an acceptance that was utterly pure. It turned and melted back into the forest, its pack flowing after it like smoke. I stood trembling, overwhelmed. What does that mean? Ronan turned to me, his expression of awe. It means the forest has not just accepted you, Lyra. It has chosen you. The true wolves are the heart of the wild. Their allegiance is not given lightly. In the old tales, only the first-blood kings and queens commanded such respect. He shook his head, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You are not just singing to the forest, you are conducting its symphony." The validation was staggering. It came not from a king or a mentor, but from the untamed world itself. It was the purest form of belonging I had ever known. That night, as we sat by the fire, a new idea, born from the day's lessons, took shape in my mind. The council uses fear and lies. They turn pack against pack, wolf against wolf. They make the different seem dangerous. Ronan nodded, listening intently. What if we used something else? Not force, not even just sanctuary. What if we used understanding? What if I could help others hear the songs you've taught me to hear? Not to command the forest, but to communicate with it, to show them they are not separate from the world, but a part of its music. He was silent for a long moment, his violet eyes reflecting the flames. "You're talking about teaching," he said finally, "not just being a beacon, but lighting a path for others to follow." "Yes, the outcasts, the suppressed, they're like I was. They've been told their song is wrong. What if we showed them it's just a different part of the harmony?" My voice grew passionate. "The council's power is division. Ours could be connection." Ronan leaned back, a look of profound admiration on his face. "You continue to astonish me, Lyra. From survivor to defender to queen, and now to a sage." He reached across the space between our chairs, not to take my hand, but to let his fingers hover just above mine. The silver and violet energy of our resonance sparked gently in the gap. "That's how we win the war," he said, "not by destroying their army, but by making their cause meaningless, by offering a truth more compelling than their lies." The plan felt huge, impossible, but for the first time the impossibility didn't daunt me. It ignited me. I had the forest as my ally. I had the true wolves at my back. I had a king of unshakable strength and wisdom at my side. And I had a song in my heart that was growing stronger every day. The council thought they were fighting a rebellion in the woods. They had no idea they were facing a renaissance.
Peace, we learned, was a fragile membrane stretched over a seething cauldron. The blackwood thrummed with new life, and our resolve solidified into a quiet purpose. But outside our mountain sanctuary, the council's wounded pride festered into something venomous. The first sign wasn't an army, it was silence. The usual trade caravans that skirted the far edges of the Blackwood, the distant howls of border patrols from neighboring packs, even the migratory birds that should have passed overhead, they all vanished. An imposed, eerie quiet settled on the lands beyond our trees. It was a blockade, not of wood and steel, but of presence and connection. "They are isolating us," Ronan said, his voice grim as we stood on a high rocky outcrop, looking out over the unnaturally still landscape. "Cutting us off from news, from resources, from any potential allies. They mean to make us a legend forgotten in a haunted wood." A cold knot formed in my stomach. Will it work? On the weak-minded, yes, he admitted. Fear is a potent weapon. The story will spread. The Storm Lord and the Silver Witch have cursed the Blackwood, driven away game and good fortune. Packs will steer clear. He turned to me, his expression resolute. But it also shows their hand. They fear direct confrontation now. They fear what we represent together. This is a war of whispers, just as I said it would be. The War of Whispers found its first casualty sooner than we expected. Her name was Tamsin. She was a young Omega from the Howling Crag Pack, a territory to the east that had always been lukewarm in its council loyalty. She arrived at the edge of our clearing just after dawn a week later, stumbling, her clothes torn, her face a mask of exhaustion and terror. She wasn't a warrior. She was a girl, barely older than I had been when I was cast out. Ronan sensed her first, a spike of pure, undeleted panic piercing the forest's new song. We found her collapsed by the guardian oak, her body shaking with silent sobs.
She flinched violently when we approached, curling into a ball. I knelt, keeping my distance, and did the only thing that felt right. I hummed, my lullaby, the one of safety and calm. I let a trickle of my harmonizing energy, soft and silver, brush against her fear. Her shaking slowed, one bruised eye opened, peering at me through a tangle of hair. Her gaze went from my face to Ronan's imposing figure behind me, and fresh terror flashed. "He won't hurt you," I said softly, my voice as gentle as my song. "No one here will hurt you. You are safe." It took time, patience, and a bowl of warm broth back in the sanctuary before her story spilled out in ragged pieces. She was like me, different, not silver eyes, but a sensitivity. She could feel the emotional weather of those around her, a living barometer for pain and joy. Her pack called it a disturbance. The local seer had marked her for attunement, a process that sounded horrifyingly similar to the suppression I had endured. She had overheard the Alpha and the seer talking. The council had issued a new decree. All atypical manifestations were to be reported and remanded to council control for assessment and stabilization. It was a purge, dressed in clinical language. Tamsin had run. They said the sickness starts in the Blackwood," she whispered, clutching the clay cup with white-knuckled hands. "They said the Stormlord's witch was calling to all the broken things, gathering an army of corrupted souls. They said you would consume us, use our differences to fuel dark magic." She looked at me, her eyes wide with a desperate need to believe otherwise. Are you a witch?" The lie was so grotesque, so perfectly tailored to exploit the very fears that had shaped my life, that for a moment I couldn't speak. Rage, cold and sharp, sliced through me. They weren't just isolating us, they were demonizing us, turning compassion, offering sanctuary, into a predatory act. Ronan's power spiked in the room, a brief, controlled surge of fury that made the fire flicker. But his voice, when he spoke to Tamsin, was calm. "Look at her," he said, nodding to me. "Does she look like someone who consumes souls?" Tamsin looked. I held her gaze, letting my silver eyes show nothing but the empathy I felt. I let my resonance radiate not power, but the steady, welcoming harmony of the sanctuary itself. Slowly, Tamsin shook her head. "No," she breathed. "She looks kind. She sounds like the moon." "The council fears what it cannot control," Ronan said. "Your sensitivity is not a sickness, it is a gift, poorly understood. Here you will not be punished for it. You can learn what it means, as Lyra is learning about her own gifts." The hope that dawned on Tamsin's face was the most beautiful, heartbreaking thing I had ever seen. It was also a crushing responsibility. She was the first, she would not be the last. We gave her a pallet near the fire, a place in our sanctuary. Her presence changed the energy. The resonance I shared with Ronan now had a third, faint, quavering note, Tamsin's fear and fragile hope. It was uncomfortable, a dissonance in our private harmony, but as I listened to it, I realized this was the true test, not harmonizing with a tree or a stream, but harmonizing with a shattered human soul. I spent hours with her, not teaching, just being. I showed her the Heartstone Chamber. I didn't ask her to resonate with the crystals, I just let her feel their steadying pulse. I took her to the chattering stream and let the playful song wash over her. I introduced her to the guardian oak, sharing the memory I'd seen. I was sharing my world, my newfound peace. And slowly, her quavering note began to steady. It didn't become strong, but it found a rhythm. She began to sleep without nightmares. She even smiled at the playful antics of the luminous moths. She was living proof that our way worked. But the council's whispers were a poison seeping through the land. A few days later, Ronan returned from a patrol of our borders, his face like thunder. In his hand was a crude doll, fashioned from straw and bound with black cord. It was stabbed through with thorns. Pinned to it was a scrap of parchment with a single hastily scrawled rune, Perruptor. "It was left at the base of the wardstones," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "A warning and a declaration." He crushed the doll in his fist, the straw snapping. "They are inciting the superstitious, telling them to leave tokens of hatred to ward off our influence. This is how they fight when they are afraid, with filth and fear-mongering." The ugliness of it, the petty malice, made me feel ill. Tamsin, who had come to see what was happening, whimpered and hid behind me. But as I stared at the broken doll in Ronan's hand, the cold rage in me crystallized into something else: determination. They wanted to paint us as monsters. We would show them what light looked like. "We need to send a message back," I said, my voice firm. "Not of threat, of truth." Ronan's eyes narrowed. "What do you propose?" "Tamsin is our message," I said, putting a reassuring hand on the trembling girl's shoulder. "She came to us broken, labeled corrupted. Look at her now. She is not a weapon. She is not consumed. She is healing." I met his stormy gaze. "We need to get her story out, not just hers, the story of what this place really is." "And how do we do that, when they have sealed us in with silence?" I smiled, an idea born from the forest's own lessons. "We don't use their messengers, we use the ones they cannot stop." I looked toward the cave entrance, where the forest waited. "The trees have memories, the wind carries songs, and the wolves go where they please." Understanding dawned in his violet eyes, followed by a fierce grin. "You want to use the gray shadow pack." They bowed to us. They recognized the song of the first blood. What if we asked them to carry a different kind of song, not a howl of war, but a rumor of sanctuary, a whisper of a place where the broken are made whole? My mind was racing now. They can cross borders no scout can cross. They can listen to campfire tales. They can lead others like Tamsin here, through paths the council doesn't know. Ronan was silent for a long moment, considering. It is a risk to involve the wild ones in our politics, to ask them to be couriers. "We are not asking them to fight," I insisted. "We are asking them to be witnesses, to be the truth that counters the council's lies. The forest chose us, Ronan. Let us use that connection, not just to hide, but to reach out." He looked from me to Tamsin, whose eyes were now wide with a mix of fear and dawning hope at being part of something important. He saw the same thing I did. This was our path forward, not a fortress under siege, but a living network, rooted in the ancient world they had forgotten. "All right," he said finally, exhaling a long breath. "We will try, but we ask, we do not command. The wild ones are not subjects, they are allies." That evening we went to the clearing. I sent out a call through my resonance, not a summons, but an invitation, a clear, respectful note of need. We waited. As the moon rose, the gray shadows detached themselves from the trees. The great lead wolf, the one with golden eyes, padded into the clearing. It sat on its haunches, watching us. I stepped forward, Ronan a solid presence half a step behind. I had no words it would understand, so I offered it a weave of feeling, of image, using my gift as I had learned. I showed it Tamsin's terrified arrival. I showed it her healing, her fragile smile by the fire. I then showed an image of other frightened faces in dark places, other Tamsins hiding, running. And finally, I offered an image of the path through the blackwood to our sanctuary, lit by a gentle silver light, a safe road. I poured into the offering my own pure intent, help them find the way. The great wolf stared at me for what felt like an eternity. Then it turned its head and looked at Ronan. Ronan met its gaze and gave a slow, respectful nod of his head, the gesture of one sovereign to another. The wolf looked back at me. Then it dipped its head once, just as it had before. But this time it was not fealty, it was agreement. It turned and vanished into the woods, its pack following. The message had been sent. Our truth was now in the paws of the wild. As we walked back to the sanctuary, the weight of the council's hatred felt lighter. We were no longer just defending, we were building, connecting, weaving a new story from the old songs. The cost of truth was high. It meant facing their lies, their dolls, their blockades. It meant opening our hearts to the broken and the scared. But as I took one last look at the whispering moonlit woods, I knew it was the only price worth paying. The wolf-led Whisper Network worked with a quiet efficiency that no council edict could match. They did not bring messages in the form of words, but in the language of the forest itself, a specific scent on a hidden trail, the pattern of broken twigs leading away from a patrol route, the sudden appearance of a rare, guiding flower in a desperate fugitive's path. They came in trickles, then in a steady, secret stream, the broken, the hunted, the afraid. A young man named Fen from the Ironwood Pack, whose touch could warm frostbitten skin or cool a fever, branded a temperature thief. A pair of twins, Wren and Corbin, who shared dreams and could speak to each other without words, denounced as mind witches. An elderly woman, Mama Gray, whose mere presence made plants flourish and seeds sprout overnight, accused of unnatural growth. Each arrival was a fresh wound to my heart, a mirror of my own past. Each set of fearful eyes that slowly softened into tentative trust was a balm. Our sanctuary, once a silent cavern for a king and his guest, transformed into a fragile, hopeful community. Pallets were arranged around the hearth. The storeroom was carefully rationed. The Heartstone chamber became a place of quiet solace where the mountain's pulse soothed frayed nerves. I was no longer just Lyra. I was the Silver Song, the keeper of the hearth, the one they came to when the nightmares woke them screaming. I didn't have Ronan's centuries of wisdom or his formidable strength. What I had was a shared language of pain and the lullaby that had become our anthem of survival. I would sit with them, hum, and let my harmonizing energy, a gentle, silvery calm, wash over their fractured auras. I couldn't heal their deep wounds, but I could help them stop bleeding. Ronan was the anchor, the unshakable stone. He secured the perimeter, taught basic defense, organized hunting parties that moved like ghosts through the Blackwood. His very presence, that immense, steady power, was a wall between them and the world that wanted them erased. He spoke little to the newcomers, but his actions were a constant vow. You are safe here. Our roles were different, but complementary. My harmony softened the harsh edges of their terror. His strength gave that softness a place to exist without fear. The resonance between us became the foundation of the entire sanctuary, a stable silver and violet chord upon which these other trembling notes could find their pitch. But with every new soul saved, the strain increased. Food was scarce. The emotional toll of holding so much fear, of feeling so many jagged resonances alongside my own, was exhausting. I began to have headaches, a constant low hum of overwhelm behind my eyes. One evening, after settling a sobbing child who missed her mother, I stumbled away from the main hearth, seeking the quiet darkness of the Heartstone chamber. I sank to the floor by the black pool, my head in my hands, the weight of it all pressing down. I was trying to be the calm, the center, but inside I felt like I was splintering. He didn't hear him enter. I felt him, a wave of deep, calming strength flowing into the chaotic symphony of my senses. He didn't speak. He simply knelt behind me. Then his hands came to rest on my shoulders. It was the first time he had initiated such contact since that first night. His touch was firm, grounding, not a lover's caress, but a healer's steadying grip. And with the touch, he did something he'd never done before. He deliberately opened the resonant bond between us, not just letting it hum, but pushing his own energy through it. It wasn't an invasion, it was a reinforcement, a flood of pure, unwavering stability, the essence of enduring stone, of deep roots, of the patient, ancient mountain. It flowed into me, shoring up my own depleted reserves, quieting the frantic chorus of other people's fear in my mind. My silver light, which had been flickering weakly, steadied and brightened under the infusion of his violet strength. I gasped, a shudder running through me as the tension melted from my muscles. The headache receded like a tide. You are carrying their weight as if it is yours alone to bear. It is not. You are the conductor, Lyra, not the entire orchestra. You must let the mountain help. You must let me help. Tears of sheer relief pricked my eyes. There are so many, and they're so scared. It feels like trying to hold back the ocean. Then do not hold it back, he said, his thumbs making slow, calming circles on my shoulders. Channel it, guide it. Your gift is harmony, not to silence the discord, but to weave it into something greater. Let their fear be the driving rhythm, let their hope be the melody, and let our bond, he gave a gentle pulse through his hands, making the silver and violet light around us flare briefly, be the foundation upon which it is all built. His words were a revelation. I had been trying to absorb their pain, to make it quiet. He was telling me to use it, to transform it. I looked into the black pool. My reflection showed the silver light in my eyes, but now, intertwined with it, were subtle threads of Ronan's violet energy, like strengthening filaments in a silvery web. How? I whispered. Tomorrow, he said, we will show them, not just how to hide, but how to be strong, together. The next morning, Ronan gathered everyone in the main cavern. Over 30 faces, from children to the elderly, looked up at him with a mix of awe and anxiety. The council calls you broken, he began, his voice filling the space. They call you flawed, corrupted. They have told you that your gifts are a sickness. He paused, letting that truth settle. They are liars. He gestured to me. Lyra's song was called a curse. It is the reason she stands before you today, not broken, but as the heart of this sanctuary. He pointed to Fen, to the twins, to Mama Gray. Your gifts are not curses. They are tools. Unfamiliar, perhaps, misunderstood, certainly, but they are part of you, as your hands or your hearts are part of you. And here you will learn not to fear them, but to understand them. Then he laid out his plan. We would not just be a hiding place, we would be a school, a sanctuary in the oldest sense, a sacred place of learning and growth. Ronan would teach physical defense, tracking, the lore of the forest. I would teach resonance, control, the language of harmony with the living world. Your differences are not your weakness. I stepped forward, my voice finding its strength. They are your unique note in the song of this forest. Alone, a single note is fragile, but together, I reached for my own power, not to shield, but to gather. I pulled on the deep thrum of the mountain beneath us, on the steady strength of Ronan beside me, and I began to hum our lullaby. But this time, I opened it. I made it an invitation. One by one, I felt them. Fen's warm, steady pulse, the twins' interwoven, quick energy, Mama Gray's deep, nurturing frequency, Tamsin's newly steadied note. I didn't try to change them. I simply made space for them in the harmony. A miracle happened. A soft, collective sigh went through the group. The air in the cavern seemed to brighten, not with a blinding light, but with a gentle, pearlescent glow composed of a dozen different subtle colors, the faint aura of each person's gift, no longer suppressed, but acknowledged and harmonized.
the overwhelming cacophony of fear I had felt the night before transformed. It was still there, but it was no longer chaotic. It was a powerful, driving rhythm under a melody of dawning hope. The resonance between Ronan and I swelled, becoming the strong, clear chord that structured it all. We weren't just a collection of refugees. We were a chorus, and we had just sung our first fragile note together. The change was immediate. Shoulders straightened, eyes net with less fear. A young boy with a gift for finding lost things immediately located Mama Gray's missing herb-cutting knife. The twins, working together, were able to sense a hidden spring Ronan had missed, solving our immediate water concerns. We were no longer just surviving, we were building, creating a new kind of pack, bound not by bloodline or fear, but by choice, by shared truth, and by a song that was uniquely, powerfully ours.
From his high seat in his stone tower, the chief seer thought he was quarantining a plague. He had, in fact, accidentally planted the seeds of a revolution, and in the heart of the evil forest, those seeds were beginning to sprout. The chorus we had become was our strength. It was also our greatest vulnerability. The council's silence had been a weapon, but it was a blunt one. Our growing harmony was a beacon they could no longer ignore, and a beacon, by its very nature, can be followed. They changed tactics. The crude dolls and superstitious tokens stopped. The eerie quiet beyond our borders remained, but it was now a waiting silence, pregnant with a new kind of malice. Ronan's scouts, Fen and a few of the quicker youths, reported no movement of troops. Instead, they found signs of a different kind of invasion. Patches of the forest where the song was wrong. Trees with bark that oozed a sticky, silencing sap. Streams that ran cloudy and lethargic, their playful song muted. It was a subtle poisoning, a corruption of the very harmony we were trying to teach. "They're using blight magic," Ronan growled, examining a withered leaf Fen had brought back. His violet eyes were dark with fury. Slow, insidious. It doesn't attack us directly. It attacks our home, our source of strength. It sows despair in the land itself. I touched the dead leaf. A faint, sickly echo of the seer's nullifying energy clung to it, a greasy smear against my senses. "Can we heal it?" I asked, dread coiling in my stomach. "We can try," he said, but his tone was grim. "But it will be a drain. For every patch we cleanse, they can blight 2 more. It is a war of attrition they believe they can win, because their resources stretch across a continent and ours are rooted in this single forest." The mood in the sanctuary, so recently hopeful, began to falter. The blight was a creeping shadow none of our songs could completely dispel. Mama Gray could make a single plant thrive, but an entire grove's sickness overwhelmed her. My harmonizing energy could soothe a person's fear, but against this calculated, magical rot, it felt like trying to hold back a tide with my hands. Then the messenger arrived. Not a wolf, not a bird. It was Kale. He appeared at the edge of the clearing one twilight, alone, unarmed, hands raised. He wore the formal colors of the silver veil, now looking travel-stained and incongruous against the wild backdrop. The moment Ronan sensed him, the entire sanctuary went on alert. Shields of energy, clumsy but sincere, flickered to life around the younger ones. Ronan shifted partially, a terrifying silhouette of claw and shadow, and moved to intercept. I followed, my own heart a frantic drum. Seeing him here, in this place that had become my truth, felt like a violation. Ronan stopped a few yards from him, a low growl emanating from his chest. "You have no welcome here, son of the Veil. Turn back." Kale didn't flinch, though his face was pale. His eyes, however, went past Ronan and found me. In them I saw not the cold indifference of the circle, but a complex stew of shame, exhaustion, and a desperate urgency. "I come under a flag of parley," Kale said, his voice tight. "Alone. I bear a message from the council, for Lyra's ears only." Anything the council has to say to her can be said in my presence. Ronan's voice brooked no argument. Kale's jaw worked. It pertains to your family, to the Silver Veil. It is a private offer. A trap, it had to be. But the mention of my family, of the pack that was my first and deepest wound, was a hook set deep. I stepped forward, placing a hand on Ronan's tense arm. The resonance between us vibrated with his protective fury. I will hear it, I said, my voice steady, but here, in the open, and Ronan stays. After a tense moment, Kale nodded. He reached into his tunic and pulled out a sealed scroll, its wax imprint the sigil of the Council of Nine, a nine-eyed raven. He held it out. The seer bid me give you this. He said to tell you that the blight upon the forest is but a taste. It can be reversed, all of it. The forest can be restored. The refugees you harbor can be granted amnesty, their records cleansed. It was a preposterous, poisonous offer. In exchange for what? I asked, coldness seeping into my veins. Kale's gaze dropped. For you, your voluntary return to council custody for assessment and realignment. He forced himself to look at me again. Lyra, they are not bluffing. They have mobilized the Raven Guard in full. They have convinced the major packs that the Blackwood's corruption threatens all territories. If you do not come, they will burn it. Not just the edges, all of it. Every tree, every root, every creature. They will salt the earth so nothing grows for a generation. They will do it to save the many from the few. His voice broke. Your father, he voted against it. He argued for the parley. This is the only chance. The world seemed to tilt. The enormity of the threat was apocalyptic. Burn the Blackwood? Salt the earth? They would commit an act of ultimate desecration to erase us. And my father? He had argued for this? For sending my betrayer to offer me a cage in exchange for a world? Ronan's growl deepened into something truly terrifying. They would murder a forest, an ancient, living entity, to kill a handful of people who have done nothing but seek to live in peace? The disgust in his voice was absolute. Tell your seer his offer is an obscenity, and if a single torch crosses my border with intent to burn, I will not stop at defending these woods. I will rain such a storm upon the council's stone towers that they will be ground to dust and scattered to the winds. Kale flinched, but held his ground, his eyes pleading with me. Lyra, please. He is one king. They are the collective might of the unified packs. You cannot win. Come back. Submit to the assessment. Maybe it won't be as bad as you fear. You could live. His words were the final twist of the knife. You could live. The same empty promise they'd always given. A life buried, suppressed, a ghost in my own skin. That wasn't living. That was the slow death I'd walked away from. I looked from Kale's desperate face to the scroll in his hand. I didn't need to open it to know its contents. It was a beautifully written sentence of spiritual death. I thought of Tamsin's first smile, of the twins working in perfect silent sync, of Mama Gray's herbs thriving in a patch of sunlight, of the gray shadow pack bowing, of the mountain's pulse beneath my feet, of Ronan's steady strength at my back, and the beautiful, complex chorus of our sanctuary. I had found my song. I had found my home. I had found my king. I reached out, not for the scroll, but toward Kale. I didn't touch him. I simply let a wave of my power, not harmonizing, but revealing, flow over him. I let him feel for just a second the truth of what was in my heart. Not corruption, not rage. A deep, unshakable love for this place and these people. A sorrow for the pack I'd lost, and a resolve as hard as diamond. He staggered, gasping, as if I'd struck him. The cold, clinical fear the council had fed him collided with the pure, emotional reality of my truth. Tell the seer this, my voice rang clear in the twilight. The girl he tried to feed to the forest is gone. In her place stands the queen of the Blackwood. We do not accept his offer. We do not recognize his authority. And if a single torch crosses my border with intent to burn, I paused, letting my silver eyes glow with the combined light of the mountain and the chorus at my back. You will learn that a forest, when truly awakened, does not burn, it consumes. I turned my back on him, on the scroll, on my past. I looked up at Ronan. The storm in his eyes had quieted into a fierce, blazing pride. He offered me his arm. I took it, the resonance between us singing a note of perfect, unified defiance. Together, we walked back toward the sanctuary, leaving Kale standing alone in the clearing, holding the unopened scroll, bearing witness to the birth of a legend he could never hope to control. The seer had gambled, trying to split me from my people, from my king, with threats and false promises. He had just guaranteed that the chorus of the broken would become an army of the righteous, and its queen was done talking.
The silence after Kale's departure was the deepest yet. It was the quiet of a drawn bowstring, of a storm cloud gathering its final cataclysmic charge. We had thrown their parley in their faces. We had declared war. There was no going back. Ronan called a council of our own, not of 9 elders in masks, but of every soul in the sanctuary. We stood together in the main cavern, the wounded, the gifted, the children, the old, the chorus. They will come with fire, Ronan stated, no trace of fear in his voice, only a granite certainty. They believe it is the only way to cleanse what they do not understand. Our task is not to defeat an army in the field. Our task is to make the forest itself a shield and a weapon. We must become one with it, more completely than ever before. He laid out his plan. It was daring, desperate, and relied entirely on the unique symphony of powers we had gathered. We would not meet the Raven Guard at the border. We would draw them in, deep into the singing heart of the Blackwood, where their numbers would mean less, and our connection to the land would mean everything. Fen and those with an affinity for earth and stone would work with Ronan to create pitfalls, to loosen roots, to guide the very terrain against invaders. The twins and other sensitives would be our early warning system, a web of felt intentions stretched through the trees. Mama Gray and the plant tenders would try to bolster the life force of the forest against the blight magic, to create pockets of resistance. And my role? I was the conductor, the keystone. From the Heartstone chamber, I would attempt something I had never done, something that made my soul tremble to consider. I would try to harmonize not just with the people, but with the entire vast wounded consciousness of the Blackwood, to amplify its natural defenses, to turn its ancient anger against the ones who sought to burn it. It will require everything, Ronan said to me later, alone in the Heartstone chamber. His violet eyes held mine with unbearable solemnity. You will have to open yourself completely. You will feel every tree that falls, every stream that boils. It could break you, Lyra. If I don't try, we all break. The forest chose me. It's time I answered that call fully. I reached for his hand. Our fingers intertwined, and the resonance blazed, a covenant between us. But I cannot do it alone. I need your strength as my anchor. I need you to hold me to this world, Ronan. If I start to drift, if I start to shatter, pull me back. He brought our clasped hands to his chest, over his heart. Until my last breath, he vowed, the words an oath etched in stone. We had 1 day to prepare. The sanctuary hummed with a frenetic, focused energy. Fear was present, but it was being forged into purpose. Children practiced hiding in the deepest crystal caves. The adults sharpened stakes, prepared healing poultices, and whispered words of encouragement to each other. As the sun set on what might be our last night of peace, I walked through the sanctuary, touching shoulders, meeting eyes, humming our lullaby. I was their silver song. I had to be strong for them. I found Tamsin curled in a corner, shivering. I sat beside her. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I admitted softly. "But we are scared together, and we are fighting for something beautiful. That makes all the difference." She nodded, and a little of the tension left her small frame.
Dawn arrived not with sunlight, but with a distant orange glow on the horizon and the smell of smoke on a shifting wind. They were here. We took our positions. Ronan gave my hand one final crushing squeeze at the entrance to the Heartstone chamber. "Sing well, my queen," he murmured, his eyes saying everything else. Then he was gone, melting into the forest to become its wrath. I entered the chamber. The crystals pulsed erratically, sensing the approaching conflagration. I knelt by the black pool, placed my palms on the floor, and closed my eyes. I began not with a hum, but with a breath. I reached down, deep, past the mountain's pulse, to the very core of the land. I found the song of the Blackwood. It was a terrible, magnificent symphony of fear and fury. The blight was a screeching dissonance. The approaching fire was a deafening drumbeat of destruction. I did not try to silence it. I opened my soul and let it all in. The pain was immediate and excruciating. It was a psychic wildfire. I felt the scream of 1,000 trees, the panic of burrowing creatures, the death throes of blighted streams. I gasped, my body convulsing, tears streaming down my face. It was too much. I was a single candle before a hurricane. Then I felt him, Ronan. Through our bond, a torrent of his immense, unwavering strength poured into me, not to fight the pain, but to be the unbreakable vessel that could contain it. "I am here," the bond thrummed. "You are not alone." Anchored by him, I did the work. I took the forest's raw, chaotic terror, and I began to weave. I used my gift of harmony. I took the scream of the pines and made it a wall of whipping branches. I took the panic of the earth and made it shifting, grasping mud. I took the water's desperation and pulled it up into a thick, choking mist that rose from the streams and bogs. I was not controlling the forest. I was giving its defensive instincts a voice, a direction, a terrifying cohesion. Outside, the world became a nightmare for the Raven Guard. The ground betrayed their footing. Vines lashed like whips from the shadows. Trees that seemed dead suddenly swept limbs down upon them. The thick mist confused their senses, and in it they heard things, growls that came from everywhere and nowhere, the haunting echo of my lullaby twisted into a dirge. And through it all moved Ronan, a phantom of violet-eyed death, picking off stragglers, shattering their formations, the living embodiment of the forest's rage. But the seer was there too. I felt his nullifying magic, a corrosive green spike trying to find the source of the forest's rebellion. He was searching for me. He found the Heartstone chamber. A wave of silencing energy slammed against the mountain's wards, against my wards. The crystals shrieked in my mind. The connection to the forest wavered. I felt Ronan roar in distant fury, diverted from the fight as he sensed the attack on my location. The seer stood at the blasted entrance, his white robes glowing with malignant power. "Enough, witch! You pervert the natural order. This ends now." He thrust his hands forward, a concentrated beam of unraveling energy aimed directly at my heart. I was stretched too thin, connected to too much. I couldn't raise a shield. I could only watch it come. And then he was there, Ronan. He threw himself between the beam and me. The nullifying energy struck him full in the chest. He didn't cry out. He absorbed it. His immense form shuddered, the violet light in his eyes flickering dangerously. The seer's magic was designed to unravel magic, and Ronan was a being of pure, ancient power. I felt it through the bond, a searing, tearing agony as the spell tried to dismantle his very essence. "No!" The scream tore from my throat, raw with a pain deeper than any a forest had shown me. In that moment of sheer, desperate terror for him, something in me broke, or perhaps something finally clicked into place. The love I felt for this king, for this man who had given me everything, was not a soft thing. It was a force of nature. It was the first blood in me, not as a curse, but as a birthright of ultimate creative power. My silver light didn't just glow, it erupted. It shot from me not as a shield, but as a spear of pure, harmonizing truth. It didn't attack the seer's nullification, it harmonized with it. My power wrapped around Ronan, around the unraveling energy, and I sang a new note, a note of mending, of wholeness, of a bond that could not be broken by any magic born of fear and lies. The green energy suffused with silver, then with Ronan's enduring violet. The three powers swirled, fused, and with a sound like a thunderclap contained in a glass bell, they rebounded. The backlash hit the seer, his own nullifying magic fused with the unbreakable truth of our bond and the ancient strength of the king, slammed back into him. He didn't have a bond to anchor him. He didn't have a chorus to share the load. He had only his own brittle, hateful power. It unraveled him. With a final, silent shriek, his form dissolved into motes of green light that were snuffed out by the silver and violet whirlwind. He was simply unmade. The silence that followed was absolute. The forest stilled. The distant sounds of battle ceased. The bond between Ronan and me pulsed, weary but stronger than ever, forged anew in a crucible of shared sacrifice. He turned to me, his form solid, his eyes blazing with a light that was wholly his own, undimmed. He was whole. He was here. Outside, the Raven Guard, leaderless and shattered by the forest's sentient wrath, broke and fled, leaving their torches extinguished in the mud. We had won. But as I collapsed into Ronan's waiting arms, trembling with exhaustion, I knew the victory was not just over an army, it was over the lie that had defined my life. I had not used my power to destroy, I had used it to protect, to mend, to unite. I had harmonized with a king's pain and turned it back on the source of all our pain. The storm had passed. The evil forest had defended its queen, and in the heart of the storm, a love as deep as roots and as bright as silver moonlight had been the most powerful magic of all. As Ronan held me, his lips brushing my forehead, I knew our story was just beginning. We were no longer just a sanctuary, we were a kingdom, and the world would never be the same.